Hey there, this is Ross Izzard. This is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in more interesting places. Most of you know that I'm kind of a gear nerd, right? And that's not just because I like gear. I'm not the guy that goes out and buys, Patagucci just because I like Patagucci, or goes out and buys the nicest stuff just because I enjoy spending money on gear. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do definitely enjoy spending money on good outdoor gear, but also I have a very deep respect for good, high quality gear. Number one, because it works, and that makes your life better when you're in the field. Number two, because it needs to work. If this stuff doesn't work, you can get yourself in big trouble pretty quickly, right? That could range from a really unpleasant experience to losing something, to having to leave something behind, to getting hurt, or in some cases getting into really, really bad situations. And for that reason, I have a lot of respect for my gear. I've got a system that works for me. I've worked on it for a long time, decade plus. And I know what I need in a piece of gear, which is functionality. It has to actually work. Durability. It has to be tough enough to actually survive in backcountry wilderness conditions. Not just like you're going for a day hike on established trail conditions, but the kind of conditions where you're scraping it against rocks and it's getting caught in trees and you're whacking through bushes and it might get wet and you're going to throw it on the ground and it's going to be out for several days. It's going to get dirty. It's going to get beat up. I got to know that it's going to hold together, and I got to know that it's going to work the way I need it to work under harsh conditions, which is to say it has to make sense to me, right? I've got to be able to build a type of muscle memory and a type of just familiarity with the gear that makes my life work better, makes me faster, makes me more efficient, and ultimately makes me safer. Now, I have historically been very careful about which brands I speak to, which pieces of gear I tell you about. My philosophy has always been that I will not talk about a brand or a piece of gear unless I trust them and use them myself and would recommend that somebody use it for their own adventures. And that's led me to have some really interesting conversations with some really interesting people. And not all of them are fly fishing people, right? Some of these are outdoor companies. A lot of them are hunting companies, because hunting companies are way ahead of the fly fishing community as far as real backcountry gear goes. And that's really led to some very interesting roads. One of those roads has been a series of conversations with Kifaru. Now, if you haven't heard of Kifaru, it is actually primarily a hunting company. They make a lot of really interesting, awesome premium hunting gear designed for backcountry use. They have not historically been a fly fishing company, but they are more and more getting into fly fishing. And the gear that I have tried from them has really hit the right intersection between functionality and durability and just general trustworthiness that I'm looking for. So I have enjoyed playing around with some of their gear this summer. I've been talking to them a lot about that gear, about what I like, what I don't like, what works, what doesn't work, and just really having an awesome time getting to know their gear and the company, and more recently, their process. So we are back to an interview format here for the last couple episodes of season 6, and our first interview is with Eric Bender. And Eric is one of the lead designers at Kifaru. He's the guy who actually makes the gear. He conceptualizes it, he comes up with it, he prototypes it, he puts it together. And, it was interesting when I sat down with them. There are some people in the outdoor space that are, I'm sure they spend time outside, but they're a different breed from a lot of us who are spending a lot of time in wilderness areas and backcountry areas. Eric is not one of those guys. It was immediately clear that this guy spends a lot of time outside. He's actually a huge fly fisher. He's not as much of a hunter, which is interesting, but he does spend a ton of time outside. He's been around the block many times when it comes to the backcountry. And he and I had a series of really awesome conversations about gear that were so interesting that I was like, man, we gotta get you on the show. So here we are. He's on the show, and he's today's guest. I think you're really going to enjoy hearing what he has to say. I think Kifaru is a really interesting company with a really interesting sort of set of philosophies and processes. And even beyond that, just getting a behind-the-scenes peek at how really solid outdoor gear gets made was, for me at least, a learning experience and an awful lot of fun. So I hope you feel the same. And with that, we'll go ahead and hop right in. All right, so our guest today is Eric Bender from Kifaru, which is actually an outdoor gear company that I have been using and getting to know for a long time, just personally out in the field. I've had a chance to work with a little bit more in recent months, and it's been an awesome experience. Through that experience, I got put in touch with Eric specifically about the whole process of how you build this gear, for really, really tough environments, and have had a lot of fun geeking out about that. So, Eric, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So, what's your official title over there? What's your day job at Kifaru?
On the business card, it says lead equipment designer. So I'm in charge of our backpacks, shelters, and then we've got another designer named Eris that takes care of our new apparel line. So yeah, I went to school for industrial design, which is just a fancy way of saying product design, but wanted to end up in the outdoor industry, and I got the chance.
Yeah, so one of the cool things that I noticed when you and I were chatting is that, and I'm going to say this as diplomatically as I can, you have conversations with a lot of people in the space who consider themselves outdoorsmen, use a lot of gear, probably buy really nice shit, and then they sort of go out and use it a little bit, but they don't really. There's not a lot of depth to it. It's like, yeah, I kind of like the backpack. It looks cool and it holds everything that I need, and like it's fine or whatever. And same thing with fly fishing gear. It's like a baseline surface level conversation. To the point that like I feel judged. I show up and I'm like, well, this pocket should be 3/4 inches that way, and there's this thing, and it kind of makes you feel like a nerd. And when you and I chatted specifically about the Kifaru Steelhead chest pack for fly fishing, it was awesome because in the first 5 minutes it was like, oh no, this guy actually goes outside and gets it in a way that most people who work on gear, to be perfectly honest, don't. Which was really refreshing and a lot of fun. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about sort of your life outside, how you got into the outdoors, and how you spend your time when you're not designing the next round of awesome gear.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, and a different Colorado than it is now. 90s Colorado is a little bit emptier and a little bit more wide open. But getting up into the woods with a family, my dad really enjoyed going after brookies in kind of small streams above Evergreen. So that was kind of our pilgrimage was heading up to small streams and throwing night crawlers and sinkers, split shot into little pools. And, you know, those weren't giant fish at all. But as a kid, pulling in, like 12 brookies is a great day, right? And especially as you keep going up there and, your skill set gets better, or, you start being able to read the water a little bit better and you have a little bit more success. That was really what kind of lit the fire is going to lakes is fun after a certain point, but you know hiking into the woods and crawling under logs and getting to that one perfect spot that doesn't have power bait cans around it, that doesn't have a bunch of trash, and then you throw that line in and pull out that fish. That was definitely addictive. So it kind of just evolved from there. I didn't get into fly fishing until much later on. I was a spin fisher for a while, just because it was more accessible. It was easier. I already had all the gear. Grew up doing that my whole life. When you make the decision to going into fly fishing, especially getting kitted out with the waders and all the equipment, I grew like a weed as a kid. I'm 6'4", right? So being able to get into certain equipment like that, when you're just gonna have to get another set the next year, definitely, like hockey players, right? If you're gonna be buying hockey pads for a kid growing up, that's an investment, right? So, not to say that waders and boots are that big of a deal, but um, a few years back, made more of a choice getting into the fly fishing side of things, and I still have a lot to learn. I still untangle a lot of, class four wind knots because my casting sucks. But yeah, it's definitely getting to that point in time up here where it's getting a little bit nicer out and the water's warming up a little bit. So hopefully I'll remember how to cast eventually here in the next couple of trips.
You know what's kind of funny is I think the more time you spend beating around in the woods, the less you care about that stuff, right? I posted a video a few weeks ago and it included a piece of me casting, and
Mm-hmm.
like whatever, I didn't think anything of it. And then I had like 10 people message me like, "Man, you're breaking your wrist when you cast and you're doing this thing when you
Yeah.
totally." And like they're not wrong, like I'm
Yeah.
not the world's best cat, but I don't care because I'm
But
hiking in there to
also,
catch fish that
yeah,
I've never seen a fly before. So like
yeah,
I can get away with it, I guess.
yeah, that, keyboard warriors, man.
That's right.
They'll poke holes, but
Well, and you still, I mean, hey, it catches fish, so it's not perfect, but we're in there and we're catching fish, and that's rad. And for the record, man, catching 12 brookies, that's still a good day for me. I
it's a
mean,
great day. I know that a lot of people dog on brookies. They consider them invasive, and they can crowd out a lot of like native species in that water. But um, if you get a day with double digit brookie count in there, it's still a good day. They could be little guys, but they fight, man. For the size that they usually are. It's still a good time.
yeah, and they're pretty, right? And I always get a bunch of hate mail whenever I say this on a microphone, so I should be careful. But I don't care that they're not
Yeah,
native. I'm not really that guy. I mean, the brookies in Colorado have been here since sometime 200 and 10 years ago when some
yeah.
guy brought them in a bucket. They're pretty naturalized in my view at this point, and I'm happy catching them.
Yeah, they've kind of earned their spot. I will tell you, up in like Labrador and up in Canada, they have brook trout that will hit on mouse patterns. Um, there's a great film out there. I think it's called Big Water. It's on YouTube, and they're going up there hitting like 24, 26 inch brookie that are nailing mouse patterns, and it looks like a blast. But it's one of those spots where you got to take, a plane, two trains, borrow a bike, get in a canoe, and then go upstream for like 2 days to even get there. So
You're not talking me out of it, to be honest. That
yeah,
that
it
sounds
sounds
like
good,
that
right?
sounds like my kind of jam, man.
That's an expedition.
All right, so tell me a little bit about Kifaru as a company. So, like I said, I've been around a whole bunch of different outdoor companies for a long time, and I learned fairly early on that there is a massive dearth of decent equipment in the fly fishing universe. You can buy stuff that'll work fine for fishing off of sort of a fishing next to the road, fishing 100 feet from the truck, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's how you fish, then it's fine. But they're really not making stuff for people who are spending a lot of time in wilderness areas or backcountry areas at all. And as a result, I would get out and start talking to and working with and buying gear from companies that have nothing to do with fly fishing, right? So some are backpacking companies or just general outdoor hiking companies. But really, where I found the most really high quality stuff has been in the hunting space, and that's kind of where Kafaru lives for the most part. Although it's been awesome to see you branching out into fly fishing. So maybe tell us a little bit about the company and the story there.
Sure. So the company was founded by Patrick Smith and his family. Patrick Smith was the founder of Mountain Smith, which, I mean, you've probably seen their logo. It's a black anvil on a yellow background. Um, Definitely kind of one of the originals in the Made in the USA backpacking gear up there with, Dan Gleason and a little bit behind Kelty and Gregory and some of those guys. But um, Patrick and his family started making backcountry gear, and they they brought the company into a huge company, right? It went um, international, and they had a dealer network and all of that. And I think Patrick and his family got kind of tired of the dealer side of things, so he dialed back. He sold his shares a couple years after that. He did the standard thing of once you get free of the company, he went on the whole African safari thing. So if you ever get a chance to go to his house, I mean, he's got full grizzly bear mount and the Black Death and kudu and Jim's Bach and all of those animals hanging up. But he came back from that. That's where he actually learned the company name Kifaru is Swahili for rhino. So while he was on that safari, he picked up that name, and he came back with the idea that there really is kind of a void of American made hunting gear. So yeah, he found out that there was kind of a void in the industry of American made hunting gear. So he started the process again. He wanted to make his ideal backcountry hunting backpack, and we started with a handful of Long Hunter, the frame. We had a cargo chair. The Long Hunter lid turned into a lumbar pack, and he just kept going from there. Internal frame bags, external framed bags that used our duplex frame system, lumbar packs. He made some of the first, I think, floorless shaped tarp shelters, at least here in the States, as well as teepees that were wood burning stove compatible. And we have a display here in our showroom that shows all of his wood burning stoves. Um, it's kind of interesting to watch because it goes from I think 1987 all the way up till 2018. So that amount of time he's been trying to figure out how to put fire in his shelter in like the lightest packable way. And it's just uh it's an awesome demonstration of, a man scientifically moving his way through pyromania and his need to have fire in his shelter and his control over fire. Um, but I mean, you get into one of these shelters with the fire going, especially after a long day where you're wet and cold and soaked, and then you're just sitting in the shelter in your t-shirt while that stove is just humming away. You got, brats on top cooking away, and your clothes are drying out, and you're just not miserable. It's pretty awesome. I've in some of our shelters, I've had my 8-man teepee through a couple of different blizzards, and um, there was some thunder snow there as well, some grapple. Been washed out of it a couple of times by putting it in a wrong location in the spring, and all of a sudden the rain just runs a river straight through your shelter. But it's nice to have the the wood stove there after that happens when you need to dry things out. But um, so yeah, I mean, Patrick, he had a ton of great ideas. He was very intuitive for what people wanted, and he spent a lot of time, and I think he still does spend a lot of time outdoors. And I just tried to pick up as much from him as I could, especially on the design side. Early on, he definitely helped with guiding me through either good ideas and bad ideas, and he also gave me a lot of a lot a lot of direction. In fact, when one of the first things that when I showed up there, he he gave me a kind of my first assignment on how to make a backcountry hatchet that had a bunch of modular heads that you'd be able to either turn it into an ice axe or a couple of other different specific tools. And I later learned it was a test, which drove me nuts because I really wanted to make it there at the end, but he kind of wanted to see what I could do, so I can't grudge him too hard on that. Yeah, so that's where Kifaru started. Is basically it was built on the premise that your gear shouldn't fail you. If built correctly, you should be able to hand it down to another person. You know, there's a thing in the product design industry where it's called planned obsolescence, right? Like your cell phone gets slower after 2 years, right? Their furniture is designed to break in very specific ways so that you have to buy another one. Your TV, once the firmware is past its update time, you're pretty much forced to get a new one. And in all honesty, it's bullshit. I think gear and products should be designed to last and or at least be repairable. So try and make these things so that the customer doesn't have to worry about their gear while they're in the field. In fact, ideally it should kind of blend into the background. It should make what you love to do more enjoyable and not be a hindrance, not have fail points, or at least hopefully not have fail points. But some people are really good at just breaking shit. So that's always, you know, you can't plan for everybody.
Yeah, and that's always I'm one of those people that's good at breaking shit, and I find that planned obsolescence usually happens to me when I'm 12 miles off in the middle of nowhere and I'm having to like duct tape a boot back together or use
Yeah.
paracord on a pack or something like that. Because that's and I think this is something that a lot of folks don't understand about the gear universe in the outdoor space is that you have gear that works well, like it's well designed, it's streamlined, it makes sense, it's well organized, whatever. And there are tons of companies, I won't name any of them here, that make that stuff. And that's fine, but then you don't have a lot of gear that hits that and is durable, right? There's a lot of
Mm.
durable gear out there that also is horribly designed. Like, I mean, I can go pick up a old army backpack from Vietnam and it'll last
Yeah.
me until I die, but it sucks, right? And I don't want to carry that. I'd rather have something better. And finding a place where, as you said, the gear works with you instead of against you. You never want to feel like you're fighting with your system when you're out there. It should be sort of a a natural extension of you. And then also knowing that if you're going to be, in my case, walking through a bunch of bushes that are ripping and tearing at everything, crawling over rocks, throwing your stuff down on the bank, it's getting wet, it's getting rained on. Sometimes I catch it on fire because, why not if you're not paying attention?
Sure.
Stuff happens and you need it to be durable because if you're out there, especially by yourself, but really no matter what, get in big trouble if that doesn't happen. And there are very, very few outdoor gear companies, and I think fewer every year as they all look to cut costs and save money and increase profit margin and everything else that really sort of get that and really genuinely espouse it in the gear that they make, which is part of what I've really appreciated about Kifaru stuff is that you can sort of put it through a blender and it still works. And on top of that, it's super thoughtful, like you and I talked about, which is awesome and really, really rare in outdoors in general, and super rare to the point of being non-existent in fly fishing gear.
Yeah, well, and there's certain things too that make it kind of hard. A lot of the fly fishing stuff is going to taped and welded seams, right? So there's a big emphasis on it being dunkable, right? I think everybody's planning on doing a river runs through it, being dragged down the river for, 100 yards by that trophy trout. And it sometimes with the way some of that stuff is constructed, you can be limited in some of the feature set on it. You brought up a good point last time that the zipper on some of this gear, just getting to inside some of the welded waterproof stuff, you almost need to have that second hand, right? Which for the most part, we're always going to have something in one hand, right? Unless we're going to, put the rod up on our shoulder and peacock it or stick it. Sometimes if I'm, kneeling down trying to unhook a fish, I'll stick it behind my calf and my thigh, my rod, just to like kind of keep it out of the water, at least under control, so I can have both hands free. But having a zipper on some of this gear that you need, two hands to open up, it makes for some pretty interesting choices. So, um, you kind of touched on that a little bit that you have some stuff that, it kind of limits your access to a little bit. Are you still using it or is that kind of driven you away from it? Are you just kind of dealing with it or?
Yeah, so this has been like my man, if you were to sit down with me and like have a beer, it's a bunch of things are going to happen, but eventually we're going to wind up talking about fishing. And then we're going to wind up talking about all the shit that makes me grumpy in fishing. And that's going to lead to a conversation about gear that sucks, right? Because I hate using things that suck because they're inconvenient. And to be honest with you, they sort of cheapen the experience for me, right? Because like now I'm out there jacking around with a zipper or whatever instead of
Right.
actually fishing and being in the moment. And I actually sort of resent that at a probably more personal level than is healthy. I'm like, okay, I'm never using this again because I want to look at the damn fish.
Yeah.
Um, but what I find is, I've stitched together a system over the years that's made up of stuff from all sorts of different disciplines. So depending on what I'm doing, I have stuff that is coming from a mountaineering or an alpine background. I'm using stuff that's coming from a backpacking background. Obviously, there's a ton of hiking kit thrown in there. There's
Mhm.
a fair amount of dedicated fly fishing stuff, assuming they can kind of make the cut that's in there. And then a lot of hunting stuff, like I said, that's being cobbled together. And it works, and it has worked for me for a long time, right? More than a decade. But it never works perfectly. And so I've sort of, I guess to some extent, allowed myself to accept good enough for a long time because there just wasn't anybody making other stuff. So it's like, you have a backpacking backpack that works or a day pack that you can wade in and it's good enough. There are things that you hate about it, but you can work with it. Same thing with the fly fishing stuff. And you just sort of make your peace with the fact that the experience isn't everything that it could be as long as the gear is meeting that baseline. But yeah, there is some stuff that you try out and it's so inconvenient and so poorly thought out or so inefficient that yeah, it gets tossed out, right? So like as I've gotten older, the longer I've done it, there are like many, many examples of things that just don't work for me. And so those are in my system for like 2 trips and then they go out. I've got a graveyard actually next to me here of bags and packs and stuff that I tried out and they didn't work. And now they're in a pile because I don't know, maybe like a zombie apocalypse will happen one day and I'll be glad that I have extra gear, extra gear next to me, but they just get removed from the kit. And that is really a shame because it's expensive. It's trial and error.
Yeah.
And also it's fixable if you're willing to actually pay attention to the details of the product. And I feel like a lot of people just don't do that. And one of the reasons I really appreciated talking to you about the Steelhead pack was that you did. And it was like, there were actually some things where I'm like, well, I don't know about this. And you said, well, hang on. There's a couple of details in there that you didn't even know about. So we were like unpacking a Christmas present, which was awesome and not common in this industry.
Yeah. Well, and there's a few of those features too that I was looking at our website after we had talked, and I was like, man, we really gotta update some of this stuff because some of it is, it was right after the initial release, right? And we didn't have um, all of the features covered in either some of the film or some of the photos that we have on there. So I'm going to be going through the website now with a fine tooth comb to try and get some of that stuff fixed. Either that, or I'll just do a video here coming up that kind of shows all of the weird little stuff. We usually call it, or at least the marketing team calls it, the Bender breakdown, where I usually just go full autism and show like it's like I'm showing a toy to my friend and I'm 7 years old. It's like, and it does this and it does this, and here's where you put your Skittles. So they usually have to dial back my copy quite a bit because I go off the deep end. But I think some of those features that you brought, or that were kind of pointed out, like the gear retractors built into the front panel, and the rip tab for getting into the pistol compartment. Some of those things I think we could do a better job of explaining and showing.
Yeah, and I think the pistol compartment's actually a really good example, right? Because that was actually my main attraction to the pack out of the gate was that it had a place to put a sidearm, and that's something that we've talked about on the podcast before. I know that there are those of you out there who have political opinions about whether or not you should carry a gun while fly fishing, but I do it by myself, and it is what it is. And it's been hard because you're stitching together like a small hip pack or chest pack with some type of carry solution with a whole bunch of other stuff that is doable, but you walk around looking like you're a Navy SEAL jumping out of an airplane somewhere as opposed to having something relatively streamlined that you can actually work with. And so
Yeah.
that feature was really helpful to me. And I guess the question that I have is in talking to you, you've got that thought through, you've thought about the zippers, you've thought about the seams, you've thought about all this stuff. When you sit down, particularly as somebody who fly fishes a lot and does a lot of what I would consider to be serious backcountry stuff, especially fly fishing, what goes into designing one of these products? Like how do you start, and then how do you take it from a concept to something that somebody's really using and beating up out in the woods?
Yeah, so you got to look at we call it the POU, the purpose of use, and you kind of have to look at all the pain points in there. Either talk with people that have specific experience with some of the competitive product or what they've used in the past. Some guys, like you said, will cobble together their own system, whether it's they've searched out what's available in the market today, or they've got their dad's old Arctic Creel, haversack style bag that they just stuff into a backpack and they head in there, or they're hiking with their fishing vest from 1982, right, with the little sheepskin flying patch and like boxes all over the place. Um, Really, when we're thinking about stuff to make, a lot of our gear is very modular, right? So it's all meant to kind of clip together. Either you could have a clip-on lid or pockets on the front, or certain accessories that are designed to go on our packs. We have to decide whether or not it's going to be carried in on the front of the body, on the pack, and then detached once you get where you're going. If it has things like weapon carry, are you going to have that as your main way of carrying a firearm in while you're on the trail? Like with the backcountry stuff, you could be hiking for half a day before you get to where you're actually hitting fishable water. So if your pistol is packed away, that's not really great. Um, some people will have different methods for that, but really, identifying the POU and how we want to accomplish some of those problems. Next up after that would be the gear that goes in it, right? It's made to carry crap, so you got to identify, like fly boxes, what's popular right now, what are big sellers. I'll do a little bit of research and see what's moving on a lot of the websites. Some websites actually have a tab up top that is the most popular, so you'll be able to go into gear, click the most popular, and see what's moving. what's actually selling through. And then I can tell, like the double-sided boxes are moving more than the fish pod, foam boxes or something like that. So after that, we kind of dial in some of the dimensions of the things that are going in there. I will start talking with three or four of our ambassadors, whoever is, really passionate about that style of either hunting or fishing or getting into the outdoors, see what they use, how they use it, and then I'll start sketching from there. So I'll usually sketch for, 1 or 2 days. I try and get into fabric as quickly as possible. I could sit down and sketch, for a long time, right? I can draw up a bunch of different versions of this, but sketch will always be a sketch, right? It's not going to be a usable product that you could actually get out there with. So I try and prototype as quick as possible because until you actually get that physical object, um, everything seems like a great idea. You're like, oh, I could have a cup holder over here, and here's where you could have your sandwich pocket, and this could be the rollout streamer fly deck. Like you could you could throw a million ideas in there, but until you actually get something that you can use and get feedback on, it's all kind of theoretical. And then we could circle back after there's actually a prototype and then start figuring out, the tool sounded like a really good idea on the side, but they need to be up front, or we need to make it thinner. Talking about like a steelhead or a chest harness here, it needed to be thinner because it's harder to see where I'm walking when I've got this giant pack on the front of my chest, right? Um, a lot of it goes into the harness. Harness is what I would call contact points. So pretty much wherever the equipment is contacting the body, you have to be very deliberate with how that's designed and proportioned and built. Like the waist belt, right? A lot of our heavy load carriage packs, the waist belt's very important because we are big believers in getting the majority of the weight on your hips and off of your shoulders. And the waist belt needs to have a very defined geometry to go around your pelvis and be able to support that weight. And then everything that's attached to that is just building off of that system, right? So the frame and the shoulder straps and being able to stabilize the load, especially when you've got, upwards of 100 pounds on your back, it's going to suck. But there's definitely ways to make it suck less if it's built correctly. And you pay attention to, important parts of the body that really don't like pressure. Like on top of your shoulders here, there's a nerve cluster, a brachial nerve cluster. If you ever been hiking and your hands get numb because you've got like a really heavy load, chances are you're compressing that nerve cluster up in your neck, and that's that's what's happening. You're closing off some um, pretty important neural pathways there. But yeah, after you figure out what's in it, you figure out how to make it so it doesn't destroy you in the backcountry, and then after that, I'm just trying to make it so that it's bomb proof and also a viable product because you can go nuts to the point where something is basically unsellable or where people aren't going to want to buy it, right? So sometimes cool features hit the cutting room floor when you know the product starts getting a little crazy, um, and that's just a fact of the matter. It's like it's our business model to make a profit. So there's sometimes it's like we can't use all the crazy fabrics. Some of the new stuff they're coming out with a lot of Dyneema composites now, which Dyneema is it's an old trademark name, but it's basically fabric made from bowstring material, and it is insanely tough, insanely strong, and insanely expensive. And from a hunting standpoint, it's also fairly loud. You see a lot of it, like the through hikers, the people that'll walk from Mexico to Canada. They have very, very lightweight bags, but they're also pretty expensive and very loud. So um, some of that goes into it as well, the material science, and always trying to find the strongest, quietest material that can still repel water, but isn't going to be extremely expensive.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think one of the things that you said there is really interesting, which is that you throw a bunch of stuff onto these things, like a bunch of features, and then your process is that you take the product and you're like, okay, does this actually work, right? And I mean, of course, profitability matters, right? But also, there's something to be said for usability in the field. Like, does anybody actually need that, right? And is it actually helpful, or is it just a hindrance? And what's funny is with a lot of fly fishing gear, and again, I'm not gonna name names, but like I think their process stops at the let's put a bunch of cool features in it and check out the prototype, and then let's just go sell it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have bought. They're usually chest packs or hip packs or something that is a vest, something like that, where it's like you get it and the thing has so many, it's ridiculous. So many bells and whistles. There's a tray over here and there's this thing over here and there's five of these and there's 10 of these. And I think it looks really good in the marketing materials if you're selling it to a certain crowd, right? And I think that's what they're going for. But then I think you start getting into sort of the outdoor segment of folks who are really spending a lot of time outside and who really are not looking for complicated. I don't know anybody who spends a lot of time in the backcountry who wants their gear to be complicated. Everyone I've ever talked to wants it to be streamlined, but most companies either aren't dealing with that market segment or they just don't care and they kind of stop at the like, well, I think it's cool to have a lunch tray, so let's just leave it in there and see who buys it. The fact that you guys are pushing past that and really thinking about this particular segment is interesting to me. And I'm curious about sort of how this possibly mentally ill group of fly fishers who are kind of like you and me interacts with sort of the main fly fishing market from your perspective, from a gear perspective, and then how all of that interacts with this sort of hunting universe. Because I think, backcountry fly fishing and hunting are very intimately related pursuits. They look a lot the same as far as access, what you're doing out there, the places where you are. Now, in one case, you're catching fish, in another case, you're bagging deer or whatever you happen to be doing. But from a baseline outdoor perspective, they're not too far off, but they're also different enough that I bet it's probably a challenge to sort of separate who you're talking to and where all that gear sits in that matrix.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting because there's definitely like there's going to be the guys out there that just like there's dudes that'll buy fully engraved, shotguns for going out to shoot birds in Argentina like once every 5 years. There's also guys that'll spend I don't even know how much money on, a crazy able reel that is anodized to the max, right? And there's it seems like in every hobby, every outdoor pursuit, there's the guys that love to have the highest end, craziest gear, right? Just as kind of like a little bit of a status thing. And then there's on the other side, there's guys who are still hunting with grandpa's old hunting rifle that's bagged, triple digit animals. It's like it's put down 100 animals over its lifetime. That rifle is, you know, however many years it's been through how many hands. It's really strange in the outdoor industry. It There's a big push for people to keep on buying like the next hottest thing, right? And it might not always be completely valid. There's kind of a thing in the retail cycle where you constantly have to keep on putting out something new and in order to be like valid in the market, right? If like let's say what would be a good example here? Do you think that your backpack will hold any less gear or get any further back in than the one that you had before if they were apples to apples features, right? There's a little bit of an arms race, right? Between different companies, right? If somebody puts out something new, you have to put out something new ahead of time or right after them, right? You have to kind of keep the focus back on yourself. So sometimes, like you said, there are products released that are completely insane with way too much organization and feature sets and stuff that's not really relevant to the point where you get it in your hands and you're like, I only need 75% of this. I only need 60% of this. The rest of it could probably be dialed back and I would have paid, half as much for it in order for it to be valid for what I needed to do. Um, I could kind of see some of that crossover in the hunting world as well, right? Like if you go to any one of these trade shows, you'll like Western Hunt or SHOT Show. If you've ever been to SHOT Show, it's it kind of seems like everybody, they're all offering the same stuff with very little difference in features. Um, Really, like boots. I've known people that have bought, a dozen pair of boots trying to find the one that fits until they really get dialed in on a brand, right? And then usually that brand fits their feet the best. It might not be what their buddy wears, but really, like you said, you've got a pile of gear in the corner of your office there. I think we all have that to a certain extent. I think everybody just kind of goes on that journey and they have the trial and error of buying multiple hundreds of dollars, if not more, worth of gear just to find out it doesn't work for them until they focus in on a company that does things that lines up with their style of getting into the outdoors. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for personal style, right? I mean, that's worth mentioning. And we talk about that on the podcast all the time. I mean, fishing, all outdoor stuff is intensely personal. Everybody has different preferences.
mm,
So, every now and then we record one of these and people are like, well, I don't like what you use, Ross. And it's like, well, I mean, that's fine, right? I mean, there might be reasons that you want to use something different. I think at this point I've thrown enough stuff like into bushes outside that I'm like, okay, I think I know what I like and why I like it. But yeah, I mean, everybody can be different, obviously, but I still think they always come back to the same cornerstones, which are that the gear needs to work. It needs to make sense. It needs to be usable in the field, and it needs to be durable enough to survive, right? And if it doesn't meet those metrics as a baseline, whatever the feature set is you want, or the colors, or whatever it happens to be, then it just doesn't need to be out there with you. And I feel like this is a market that is inundated all the time with gimmicky stuff and stuff that isn't really doing anything that's making your experience better just because they're trying to sell through. And I get it. Like we're running companies trying to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a business owner too. But it's cool to see folks who are really digging in and focusing on a segment of the market that I think has been underserved for so long that people kind of forgot that we exist, right? And so I guess I'm curious for your thoughts on this sort of move from what I consider to be for a long time only fly fishing companies made stuff for fly fishers, and that was all they did, right? But they really a lot of those companies are built around fishing the local tailwater and getting a grip and grin, which is fine, but it's just a different activity. Now you're starting to see companies like Kifaru and others who are noticing that there is a group of people out there who are doing this activity differently, and they're starting to kind of wiggle their way into that space. And I'm curious from a professional standpoint and somebody who's sort of obviously tracking these trends, watching this stuff, thinking about the gear, evaluating what's out there. Talk to me a little bit about that market segment and the need to move into that market segment and how those folks are starting to blend into the hunting world, the outdoor world, and the rest of it. Because it's fairly new, I think, just the last few years really that I've seen a movement in that direction.
yeah, I mean, Sitka just came out with a whole fishing line. They've been pretty well established in the hunting market for a long time. I think there's always a draw to finding a different customer base, right? When you are pretty well established in an industry, you kind of look to see what other related industries are in that space and see if you could make gear for that side of your customer base. I'm a firm believer that a lot of our customers are also fishermen, right? Just we kind of we go after the backcountry hunter, the dedicated hunter, whether you're hiking in 7 miles or if you're driving to a spot and just hiking, not too far from there. I do think that it kind of rolls hand in hand, right? The hook and bullet crab. I think a lot of guys just enjoy getting out into the outdoors in a bunch of different ways. That's kind of been my push to diversify our lineup a little bit to see if we can, you know, get some good products out there for the other side of our customers' interests. I think that's usually just kind of the draw, right? It's like once you get a solid hunting lineup, as far as your expedition grade bags, your load haulers, your day packs, all the accessories that go with it, kind of like, all right, cool. What's next? Like, I want to uh keep making gear for all aspects of getting the hell out of town and doing cool stuff in the woods.
So do you think that this is going to be kind of an ongoing thing for the company? Or are y'all going to keep pushing down this road? Is it
Yeah.
what are the plans for the future? I know you can't give away any trade secrets, but
I've got sketchbooks full of stuff. There's definitely a few key products that I'd like to pursue on the fishing side in the future. A lot of them will be uh, lifestyle products as well, things that people can use every day. Um, we tend to kind of forget the fact that, I mean, here in the shop, people hunt a lot, right? And that's just kind of the benefits of the job is you get out into the woods quite a bit. But most people are, they're waiting 52 weeks a year just to get the 2 weeks off that they could go hunting with their buddies, right? So part of me is also thinking is like, what does that other 50 weeks look like? People got to travel, people got to go to work, people got to, drive around. There's a ton of stuff that we could probably come up with good solutions for that would fill a need in their life as far as, gear that will make their day-to-day life a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more enjoyable. So I'm always thinking about what other ways can I solve somebody's problem through, a good piece of kit. So, another thing is 100% of our customers shoot stuff. Right? We're a hunting company, and hopefully people are practicing more than just a couple of shots right before deer season. So I'm also thinking about other gear on that side of things too. Making those range trips more enjoyable.
that's awesome. Well, I mean, that's exciting, and I am looking forward to seeing what you got cooking in there. Uh, if you wanted to go and check out what all is in the lineup now, where would somebody go to check out your current products?
So you go to kifaru.net, and we have everything up right now. We're also on Instagram and all the social medias. So we do a weekly mod minute where we kind of talk about. I think Kenny just did a spring bear pack dump. So the guys are going in and chasing after bear right now, and they're actually chasing down turkeys as we speak. So we always try and have something as far as short format videos and long format stuff too, where we kind of talk about the gear, how we use it, new gear that's coming out. I know that Kenny just did a stove review. Um, we try and shake it up as much as possible, but we're going to be at a lot of the Total Archery Challenge events where we're one of the sponsors there. We'll have a booth where people could come by and check things out. I'd like to try and get into some more fishing shows. There's a couple of them, but right now we're just kind of focusing on the hunting stuff until some of the new stuff comes out, and then hopefully we'll start going to different trade shows to kind of dip a toe into that market and show people who we are.
Okay, well, that's a good teaser trailer. Go check out the website, guys. There's some cool stuff on there. Like I said, I've been beating up the Steelhead chest pack quite a bit recently, and I think it will be staying in my lineup for the summer, which will be a lot of fun. I've actually actively tried to break it a couple times at this point, and it hasn't yet. So we'll see if it'll make it all the way through. But I'm impressed.
Yeah, I mean, hit me up if you do manage to break it. It's I always like to see what these things can hold up to. It sounds like you kind of go face first through the forest a little bit.
I do. I'm a caveman. There's no finesse to what I do, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, no, it's always great to see. I'll see some stuff come back from warranties, and it's like, holy shit! Like I never even thought that was possible. Um, it is kind of interesting too. We used to have a tactical line as well, and this is back when the global war on terror was pretty active, and we had stuff coming back to repair that, it was like strapped on the outside of a Bradley, and they took a glancing shot from an RPG, and I had to stitch up trap holes that went through their pack, and like they finished the tour with their pack, and it was stuck together with dental floss. They did what they could, but it's always interesting to see. It's like Grandpa's hunting rifle. Like you could look at it and you're like, I remember that ding on the stock from when it fell out of the blind. It's good gear picks up a story, right? And as you use it and as it holds up, it becomes kind of a fishing or a hunting buddy. So hopefully it's built to the point where it could actually get a good amount of stories out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate it. I'm having a lot of fun using it. So, Eric, thanks for joining us. I think what you do is fascinating. When you do start releasing some of these new surprises, maybe we can have you back on to chat about those. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode of the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast. We've been talking to Eric Bender with Kifaru International. What an interesting guy doing interesting stuff. I mean, being able to swim around in gear conversations all day is kind of a dream come true, I think. So, really appreciated him coming on. Really appreciate what Kifaru is doing, and appreciate all of you for joining us for this interview. I will almost certainly be back with our final interview episode next week on Friday. You guys may have noticed that I missed the upload schedule on Friday this week. That's because it's just been a wild week, so we're going up on Saturday instead. I'm going to do my very best to get next week's episode up on Friday as planned, but I will also be in Italy, and so there's a chance that I'm going to miss that one, and if that's the case, we may miss a week here. So I apologize for that, but as you guys know, it's really just me at this point doing these podcasts as far as recording, editing, publishing, all that stuff. That's all just little old Ross, and every now and then, little old Ross goes on a trip. So I'll do my best, but if I miss you, then I miss you, and I'll be back shortly. We're not going anywhere, and we still got some interesting stuff to talk about for the remainder of the season. But for now, hope you're having a great week. Hope you're out there fishing. Stay safe. Keep ripping lips. See you back here real soon. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Just hope I see you wearing good gear.